I have some experience in argumentation. I'm not an expert, just a disclaimer for the beginning, but I have experience in both formal and informal argumentation because before attending the philosophy bachelor studies, I used to study for 2 years the applied math in Kiev Mihail Academy. So I'm a bit biased, actually, because I love math more than anything else. And that's why today we are going to have 2 practical exercises. And one of them will be connected to mathematical logic, to formal logic. First of all, I want to ask you, do you, any of you, have any experience in formal logic, in argumentation? Maybe Anton is lawyer, but he's out of here. Maybe anyone else? No? No lawyers, no philosophers, no logicians? No. Okay, so I can tell you whatever I want and you will believe me. Okay, I see. First of all, I have some notes. Thank you, Anton. Okay. As I've already said, we'll have some practical exercises, but also we'll have 3 main parts of our workshop. Is just a brief introduction to the argumentation, to different types of argumentation and logic. And then we'll talk a little more about formal logic before doing the exercise and about informal logic. Okay. First of all, let's define what argumentation and what arguments are, basically. Argument is a series of statements that are called premises that are intended to determine the degree of truth of another statement or the conclusion. This is just a very basic explanation. You can see it on Wikipedia if you want. And what we need to remember about arguments is that it's not only the premises, it's also the connection between them and the conclusion. It's the way they are working. We can see arguments everywhere. We can see them in our everyday life. It's just in every dialogue we use arguments in natural language, in just regular languages. But also we can meet arguments in law, in science, in medicine, in IT, a lot of times. But what science is studying these arguments is logic, of course. And logic studies not the truthfulness of these arguments, but the forms of them. Logic doesn't care if the argument is true or not, basically. It just tells you how to build them correctly. So we can come to a little scheme, which you can note if you want. Let me think how to write it. Okay. Here we have argument that can be, we are talking about two of the biggest types of arguments. They can be deductive or inductive. Deductive argument means that conclusion must be certainly and necessarily following from the premises. It means that if you have the premises that are true, the conclusion, and the logic works and everything, the conclusion will be true. Inductive arguments are those when conclusion also follows from premises, but with some probability. It means that it may be true if we don't have some other information that may change the truthfulness of that. And then deductive arguments can be valid or invalid. Valid arguments are not the ones that are true, coming back to what logic does. Valid arguments are those that are built correctly. It means that, just a second. Okay. It means that deductive argument is structured so fine that if all of the premises are true, we can come to the certain true conclusion. That's why valid arguments can be sound and unsound. Can you guess what this sound and unsound means?
Maybe it's explicit and implicit, явні і неявні.
Maybe, but sound means that all the premises are exactly true. And having that the argument is valid, so it has all of the logic in it, we do get a true conclusion. Unsound is almost the same case, but some of the premises, or all of them, are untrue. That's why we cannot come yet.
What are those premises?
Premises? Premises are the part of the argument. Maybe an example will work. The very basics, the very classic example about Socrates, that Socrates is a human, all humans are mortal. Thus, Socrates is mortal. Here, the premises are Socrates is a human and all humans are mortal. It's the part, it's the building links of the argument itself. It's what we state to come to the conclusion. Good. And yeah, unsound means that some of the arguments weren't true, so we cannot have the true conclusion. Invalid deductive arguments are always unsound because it lacks logic. It cannot be sound because it's just illogical. The conclusion may be true, but it doesn't mean that it's a strong argument. Then inductive arguments are either strong or weak. It's almost the same as valid and invalid, but we remember that inductive arguments have some probability in them. That's why strong argument is the most probable, is the most possible. And weak arguments are those that are least possible, obviously. And just as deductive arguments, strong arguments can be cogent and uncogent, and weak are only uncogent. Cogent arguments are the most possible and the most correctly built, and the uncogent is obviously those that are not very very likely to happen. Okay. Let's talk about a bit examples of this deductive and inductive. It's a very basic and example, not in the formal language, is A equals B, B equals C, thus A equals C. It's deductive. It's just obvious, it's axiom, it happens all the time, no matter what, at least in mathematics. Inductive examples, it will look something like that. Do you know what this symbol means? Approximately. It's something like B. A is approximately B, B is approximately C, thus maybe A is something like C. Just to more easily understand. Okay. We need to remember that an argument can have one or more premises, but always only one conclusion. Each premises and the conclusion are so-called truth bearers. That means that, not arguments, premises, excuse me, that premises and the conclusion can be either truth or false, not both. They can never be both unless you're a cat of Schrödinger. Usually, truth has just T or 1. We will need it to have our exercise. And false is considered to be a 0. You can sometimes meet it in IT and in mathematics. It's just basic Boolean numbers, either 1 or 0. Now we are moving a bit to formal logic, and for this I will tell you a little bit about the symbols. That for each argument form we have different symbols, just like this truth or false, 1 or 0. But in algebra, in mathematics, in mathematical logic, they of course are, we just use letters that mean that, letters that are correspondent to some premises, let's say so. Just A, B, C, whatever. But also we have different symbols that connect them, that are like conjunctions, such as, you don't need to write it yet. We have this, we have this, we have this, and so on. Does anybody here know what these symbols mean?
Третій знак – це слідує, четвертий знак, що це працює рівність в одну і в іншу сторону. Плюс це плюс. Перший це
Ні.
другий це або.
Це вірно. Так, окей. Some of you already know, but we will stop a bit more on these symbols. I will turn the, whoops, clicker now. Now I'm going to show you just an introduction, a very first steps in formal logic. It's connected to this symbol. So the first symbol, it's called conjunction. And it means and. Something and something. If we make a table of truth, which we know already that true is 1 and false is 0, it will look like this. A, B, A and B. Oops. Does anybody here understand what this table of truth means?
Yes, this is a result of applying the operator.
Absolutely correct. If we try to translate it to informal language, we will see that if we use two premises, A and B, and we say, like an example with Socrates, Socrates is a human, all humans are mortal. Socrates is a human and all humans are mortal. If the both premises are true, the result will be true. But if at least one of these premises is false, we cannot get the true result if we use this conjunction, this and. Is it more clear now?
Yes.
Just think about it in this informal language with the example of Socrates. Okay, the second one. I'll try to use different colors. Disjunction. Or. And for this case, the table of truth in this case, the table of truth will show us truth if at least one of the premises is true. If both of them are false, it's obviously that we are getting false result. Is this clear? Yes? Okay. Then the third function is implication. Oops. Implication means if, then. If something is true, then something else is, we'll see. So for this function, we can see that if the premise is true, the conclusion cannot be false if the logic works correctly. But in all of the other cases, we can get the true conclusion from.
Premise is A, B is what?
In this case, yes. In this case, yes, because its implication basically shows the conclusion. That it leads us to conclusion.
I mean, in the table conclusion, it's in third column, or which one?
The third column shows us the use of this implication. Is the meaning of the function. But in this little scheme, when A implication B, B is like a conclusion. It's like we have premise or several premises. They can be like A and B and C and then D.
So in each this examples of column is like conjunction, deduction, and implementation. I mean, third one it's like result.
Third one, yes, it's like result.
And the previous one is premises.
It's the connection between premises. It's when we say something and, well, like A and B, then C. Or thus the C, therefore C. These symbols also can be changed to implication if we are going to move a bit forward, a bit more forward. Okay, and the fourth is equivalence. Equivalence, as really some of you have already said, means if and only if. It means that it's like implication that works in both directions. If and only if.
Like idea A work with idea B.
It can be shown as B, and from B follows A.
And link it as premises. In this case, link it as premises. I can't understand where is premises in this formula.
The premises are A and B. Here also A and B are premises, but for some other conclusion. It's just a short link of the big chain of premises and conclusions.
Short link of what?
A big chain.
Chain, okay.
Yeah. It's schematically, you can have one premise that leads to conclusion, that together with another premise leads to other conclusion, and so on.
Okay.
Here it's A, it's B,
Okay.
in this case. Okay, for equivalence, it's a bit more obvious. It's basically the equality. If we see that two premises are equal, then from one follows another, and so on. And the last but not the least is, I'm going to even take this red, negation. Very important in our everyday use also. it can be shown as this symbol before. It can be little something like that. Overlaying. Negation. Obviously, it means not A. Okay, not A. Okay. You may ask yourself and myself, why did I show you all that? That's because we are coming to our first practical exercise. I have prepared myself, yes. I've spent some time. Several exercises, personal, for each of you. How many are here? Only 10? I see 9. 9, okay. Well, I have 11. I have exercises connected to these tables of truth. In some of them, you will need to find the situation, the truthfulness of premises when the conclusion is true, and in some, when the conclusion is false. Is it? For example, here the conclusion is false, others are true. Here the conclusion is false, others are true. Here the conclusion is true, others are false. Okay. The task is clear. Everybody have their notebooks with them, Taras? Yeah? Okay, get them. But now we must move to our next topic. It's connected to informal language, informal logic. And here, without further ado, I want us, I don't think it's gonna require any notes, but maybe if you want, we're gonna talk about logical fallacies. Fallacy, do you understand what it is? It's when the logic doesn't work right, like to be brief and short. And I believe everyone has met someone who tried to persuade you, who tried to convince and argue something, but their logic had some spots, had some injuries in them, and that's why you couldn't believe it. You felt that something is wrong, but you didn't know how to tell the person why they are wrong. Now we are gonna look at 15 of the fallacies. Just a second. Okay. First of the fallacy is maybe one of the most famous because a lot of people use its name. It's ad hominem fallacy. Ad hominem fallacy is from Latin for against the man, and it's when the person replaces their logical argumentation with some attack language that is unrelated to the matter or to the truth. They're just saying like, you're stupid, and so on, like that. It's a fallacy of relevance when someone criticizes another person's view instead of proving their rightness. It's also always based on personal characteristic stuff and so on. And for an example, Сверхчеловек, да? For an example, classical example, all people from Crete are liars. All people from Crete are liars. It doesn't sound like truth. It's based on some personal not liking these people from Crete. And it's stereotypes that have no connection to logical argumentation. And okay, another example that's Jim roots for a British football team. That means that he's unfit to be a police chief in Ireland. Because he is rooting for British team, he cannot be anyone in Ireland. It's also based on some personal stuff that has no connection to logic. The second fallacy is called strawman argument. Strawman argument. It's named after something not real, something not full of life. It's when someone attacks the position that you don't really hold, that they are saying that you're sexist, but you're not. You're racist, but you're not. But they build their argumentation on this. And
you have a presentation, I'll be like,
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Let's find this fallacy in this example. The senator thinks we can solve all our ecological problems by driving a Prius. What's the fallacy here? Where is it? The senator thinks we can solve all our ecological problems by driving a Prius.
Maybe he did not say it, actually. This argument isn't strong, produced by somebody else who wanted to.
There is no argumentation.
There is all.
Yeah,
The word
that we
all.
can solve.
So all problems will be solved by one action.
Yes, that's actually the fallacy. That's the main thing that is not correct. My computer turned off. Okay, I'm in here. Sorry. My notebook, my computer is not working right. Excuse me. Okay. The third fallacy is appeal to ignorance, or argumentum ad ignorantium. It sounds obvious. It's when your opponent thinks that you are ignorant, thus there is no need to have this conversation with you. And here's the example. Or when the person themselves is ignorant and they know that and they try to build their argumentation knowing that they are ignorant in something. We have no evidence that the Illuminati ever existed. They must have been so clever they destroyed all the evidence. Okay, let's come to another fallacy, false dilemma or false dichotomy. It's when you put your opponent or yourself in a situation when there are only two options, but there are more than two options, but you don't see other options. For example, either you love me or you hate me. That's it. Then slippery slope fallacy. Slippery slope fallacy, it's just that some unlikely outcomes are likely. Are likely when you don't have evidence that prove they are not. It's like all of the proofs that God exists and so on. For example, the example is too long, we'll move to the next one. Circular argument, or petitio principii. It's, for example, because smoking pot is against the law, this leads many to believe it is wrong. It's our situation that hurts many of us. But do you see what the fallacy here is? Because smoking pot is against the law, this leads many to believe it is wrong. In the right logical way, it should be vice versa. People should know that something is bad, and then they would make a law that prohibits it. Hasty generalization is when you generalize something that cannot be generalized. For example, people nowadays only vote with their emotions instead of their brains. Not all of the people do that. Okay, Dima says that we have to stop.
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank Katya for her workshop. Sorry,
I tried my best.